Holy friggin' moly, Street Fighter closed beta test number 2 has been announced. And for anybody that was already in the previous beta, you're already invited, and they will be taking separate invites. So they're going to be opening up the pool of players significantly more than what was before. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this, let's just watch the trailer that they put up for the new beta. Oh, it's very exciting. Sorry, closed beta. Did I say open? It's closed. I like it. I like it. It's a good trailer. It's actually a good trailer. They have a trailer for their new closed beta test on December 16th to December 19th. And I had to check. I was like, oh God, no. But it isn't. It's actually 3 days after Crisis Core comes out. Thank God. Thank friggin' God. Very happy about that. We at least get a few days. No PS4. There was no PS4 version before. No PS4 version, just the current gen systems and Steam. I am actually still surprised that there's a PS4 version of the game on the table. Like, I really am. I still think that that's like one of the weirdest elements of all of this stuff is that, you know, there is still going to be a PlayStation 4 version of Street Fighter 6, which is very weird. If anything about the previous beta can tell us, it's likely going to be the night, the evening of the 15th, where this is going to be launching and becoming playable. And then it'll likely be Sunday night into Monday morning, something around the 12 to 1, you know, that will also be when it goes down. Just as a heads up for anybody that's like, so what night do you make yourself available? I would actually most likely make yourself available on December 15th. That's likely when it's going to be actually playable. Right? There was a lot more than just this trailer. Seemingly a huge ass list of balance adjustments and different things that will be changing going into this beta. I've already surveyed, multiplayed. I've already looked at all of this, and I'm pretty damn happy, right? I'm actually kind of happy with what is going to be going on here. So let's go over it really fast. Just for anybody that knows, there's still going to be an application process. If you were invited to the previous beta, you will need to, you're pretty much going to be already subjected to entering closed beta 2. But there will be new applications, so you can apply. For anybody that hasn't applied yet, my God, go do it as soon as possible. So, purpose of the closed beta test. So to monitor the player experience for participants, survey for feedback, the same as the first one, yada, yada, yada. And changes since the first closed beta test. We have actual already balance adjustments. Now, why is this important? The reason this is important, chat, there's a little bit of a history lesson I have to remind everybody of, and that's a little game called Street Fighter V. The Street Fighter V betas, which we got aplenty, right? We got many Street Fighter V betas leading up until its launch. However, there was something that happened during every single Street Fighter V beta from one game to the next. Unfortunately, the result of that was that things that characters could do, they could do less in the next one. System mechanics that were essentially possible at one point got taken away. And the game became more and more simplified as a result of just the beta tests, to the point where it was like all this cool stuff that we kind of found before just didn't work at all. Everything seemingly was just getting nerfed. And this wasn't just one time this happened. It was actually 3 separate tests, 3 different moments of these betas from game to game to game, or moment to moment to moment, where the game literally got stuff taken away and then taken away again, and then even more stuff taken away. And that was the one that eventually launched. It was crazy, and it was extremely demotivating by the time the game eventually came out, because it was a lot less fun than what it was at the start. How is Street Fighter 6 going to respond to essentially its first beta, which people found some pretty crazy stuff. There's some pretty great stuff, pretty fun things that you could do in this game. There's a lot of open-ended abilities that the characters are given, and system mechanics that allow for some saucy shit to happen. It's actually kind of cool. So some bug fixes, profile bug fixes. There's a new feature to reduce input delay in the graphics menu. Turning this option on will shorten the gap between your inputs and the actions happening on screen. This is especially useful if you're using a monitor capable of 120 Hz on PS5 or Xbox. Interesting, like full 120 Hz compatibility on PS5 and Series X and S, specifically targeting less input delay. Pretty cool. For the Steam version, the effect can be achieved by turning this option on, setting VSync to off, and setting the refresh rate to 120 Hz or higher. So they're straight saying, hey, if you want to have a little bit less input delay, the game technically supports it. You know, we are officially supporting it in some way. But please note, depending on the monitor, you may experience some screen tearing. And this is the part where, unfortunately, as somebody like me that's a streamer and a content creator and a YouTubist, I will not be able to likely do this. I will probably have to find a way to get the tearing to its minimal, to have as little input delay as possible, and I'll have to finagle something in between that makes all this stuff work. So, but for anybody else that doesn't have to worry about capturing footage and streaming and all this stuff, yeah, just, man, you're gonna have some pristine inputs. So, online battles, behavior adjustments, they adjusted how input delay works when the connection status causes frequent changes to the delay, represented by the value at the top of the screen. So this will no longer decrease in a round where there has already been an increase. English version of this means when you were playing Street Fighter 6 in the first beta, there was a calculable difference of input delay that visually showed on the screen. At times, depending on the quality of the connection, the input delay would either go up or go down a little bit. And that made it kind of rough sometimes. At some moments, it was like there was a little bit too much variation between like 1 frame of input delay or 2 or 3, and it would actually fluctuate between the two, which is some shades of how delay-based netcode works, even though it is using rollback. And that was kind of a hope that would go away, that it would sort of establish that at the start and then not change anything. And it seems like the game is not going to be doing that anymore. It's going to set it at barely a minimum, and whatever your ping is, however much that value is, it'll establish that and then hold that, which means that the input they got from the previous beta, they likely are able to make the netcode better so that it doesn't have to fluctuate anymore. Which is the kind of stuff you get from feedback during a closed beta test or an open beta test or something like that. So that's very good news. This technically translates to netcode improvements, is what we can sort of look at this as. Here's the big one, some battle adjustments. They fixed some bugs, has tweaked some aspects of the game related to controls and overall strategy, but there are no individual character adjustments since the last closed beta test. There is no specific things that they are like targeting or toning characters down or buffing characters up. Characters have a lot of saucy stuff right now. Some seem easier to use than others, obviously, but that's just the nature of a fighting game. So, good start. Behavior adjustments. Modern controls so that crouching heavy kick will be performed when pressing down, plus forward heavy attack. They're already updating modern controls to make it a bit more accessible, which is completely fine. And also, I think a lot of these things were just like the command list was featuring the display for an attack, and it was actually the wrong display, I think is what this is sort of going over. Crouching medium kicks that can be canceled into special attacks now have a hit stop of 9 frames instead of 10 frames. These sounds like some very specific things. Performing a super art, such as a quarter circle forward ×2 or quarter circle back ×2, the input delay going from down to forward or back is now 12 frames instead of 10 frames. That makes it seem like that seems like a buffer window, right? That is good, right? Yeah, these are just like fixes, like things of the character just didn't feel right in some situations. Really specific stuff. These aren't buffs. These aren't nerfs. This is just polishing. And this sounds like a buffer window thing. So that's like, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that, yeah, the attack should come out more consistently, which isn't really a nerf or a buff, you know? It's just polish. Fixed an issue where you can perform a half circle forward command to perform a quarter circle forward special. You would get an attack instead of the Shoryuken command input. So what? Yeah, they're figuring out the input system. You got to remember, this isn't the same engine that all the previous Capcom games have been running on. This is actually a brand new engine, so all the input that's going to be going through this engine doesn't work just like Resident Evil or Monster Hunter or something like that. They have to make it appropriate for fighting games, and that's what they're picking up on. Cool. All this is like minor. All this is super minor. And then we get to some of the crazy stuff. Balance changes. Perfect parrying a projectile now has the same damage scaling when attacking an opponent during their recovery as perfect parrying a strike. So this is technically a system-wide nerf, right? This is technically a nerf to perfect parrying. If anybody remembers before, when you would perfect parry an attack, the damage scaling that happens after was intended. You were supposed to get damage scaling after a perfect parry, but there was some specific situations where it didn't apply. So if you perfect parried, if somebody did low forward fireball and there was a gap there, and you blocked the low forward and you parried the fireball, you perfect parried the fireball, you'd be able to immediately act after that action and then get full damage. For some reason, it just didn't scale. I still think that's kind of cool, right? I'm like, ooh, that's a really specific moment. That seems really cool, but it also makes throwing projectiles after like buttons kind of terrifying. I'm assuming the only reason this is changing is because it now happens all the time, right? Possibly in testing, it just happens way too much. And now it's a little bit more predictable as people are going to throw fireballs and how the game is played. So maybe like, oh man, maybe that actually stifles the way the game is played. So it seemed really exciting at first that people were discovering this tech, but they were like, no, it's now going to act the exact same way as perfect parrying, normally does. You're going to get the same damage scaling. So here's the interesting part. If you continue your parry stance after perfect parrying a projectile, so that you're doing the same thing, if you release that parry within a certain period of time, there's no recovery time for releasing the parry. No recovery time for releasing the parry will occur. And that made it seem like you can immediately act after, right? And I believe, right? I believe that's what this is translating to, that you can still enact immediately after doing a perfect parry and still get, the full combo you would like. You can still actually enact all the damage. I'm sorry, you enact all the actions you'd like to, but the damage will be scaled. You'll get the damage scaling as you normally do after a perfect parry. That just seems like that makes a lot of sense. But all it really does is allow you to tap the parry in some of these situations and then act after immediately, because you don't have to go through the recovery. You just boom. What they kind of did was still make perfect parrying very good, right? And we learned more about how parrying works. Parrying is actually kind of decent because you can cancel out of the recovery of parrying into like block and stuff like that, and perfect parry anything, right? If you perfect parry something, you immediately get to act after. So, all right, it's not really like a nerf or a buff. It's just like we're back to even ground. It's something, everything's acting a bit more, consistently is what it sort of seems like. Here's a big one. Level 1 super arts for all characters no longer have projectile invincibility. It was almost uniform that characters in the game's level 1s would have invincibility on everything, right? Like a fully invincible level 1 in case you are completely, meterless and you can't do anything and you don't have any green bar and you're stuck in the corner. You're like, oh God, I'm going to throw my level 1 out and it'll have invincibility. Here's the thing. It still does. It still will act the same way. However, it loses projectile invincibility. Weirdly enough, it actually loses projectile invincibility. So if people are trying to meaty you, right, and which is what you normally do in this game, if you're trying to get meated and you can't parry and you don't have green stuff, it's still strike invincible. Interesting, like super interesting. It's still good. This technically buffs one character in the game, and it's Guile. It's Guile and maybe Jury, right? Just maybe Jury. So these characters can chase behind their fireballs, make their fireballs meaty if you're completely depleted on meters. So that's actually pretty decent for them. But at the same time, level 1 super arts for all characters no longer having projectile invincibility is kind of interesting. That's a really specific change. Ryu, to go along with the invincibility change made to all level 1 super arts, this is made to all level 1 super arts. Ryu's Hashogeki and Shin Hashogeki, which are level 2s, are now considered strikes and not projectiles. That's actually it. So, funny enough, they didn't go ham and nerf everybody, right? They didn't specifically take away all of the crazy stuff that people have discovered yet. There was a couple of things that are sort of making everything more uniform between, perfect parrying, acting one way, and then acting a different way in a very specific scenario. And now they're just making it act the same way, but also making it a bit more usable after projectiles. That's actually a really good sign. To me, this sort of echoes the sentiment that seemingly these developers are listening, and I think they have the perspective, because these were the same people that put together Street Fighter V and its beta at the start. It seems like they know That didn't go well. That always sat as a sour element with the community, and it did. It was one of the things that just made me not excited to play Street Fighter V by the time it eventually came out, because we played so much Street Fighter V before the game's release, leading up to the game's release in like February of 2016. And my God, dude, we ate too many sour grapes from beta to beta to beta, where it was like, holy moly, let me just do some of the fun stuff we used to be able to do, man. And seemingly, at least in beta 2, in the second closed beta, characters are going to be doing the same stuff. You just get to find more things. Cool. A lot of people are asking about what's happening in the closed beta test, and there is only these many playable characters. The exact same roster as closed beta 1. But I think Cammy's going to be playable. I'm just going to throw that out. I think Cammy and one other new character is going to be playable. Dang, I said but. I said but really loud, and I guess that also makes sense. I see there being a reveal trailer of some kind at the Game Awards. I get it. They've said these characters are playable, but there has been situations in the past where Capcom is like, hey, here's our demo, right? Here's our show floor demo or whatever. Here's how many characters are playable, and then the next day a trailer drops, and now you have some new playable characters. And you're like, what the hell? Oh, cool. So I would like to think that maybe, just maybe, and I'm not super confident on this one, I would like to, I think I would like to believe that it would be a very, very, very good show of faith, especially for some people, if they were able to stick in a couple of new characters. And I truly feel like Cammy is going to show up at the Game Awards in some way. I feel like that's the best place to show up, Cammy.